12.38, that's Savatthi. Buddha said, monks, what one intends and what one plans, and whatever one has a tendency towards, this becomes a basis for the maintenance of consciousness. When there is a basis for us, when there is a basis, there is a support for the establishing of consciousness. When consciousness is established and has come to growth, there is the production of future renewed existence. When there is the production of future renewed existence, future birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure and despair come to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. If monks, one does not intend and one does not plan, but one still has a tendency towards something, this becomes a basis for the maintenance of consciousness. When there is a basis, there is a support for the establishing of consciousness. When consciousness is established, has come to growth, there is the production of future renewed existence. So, such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. But monks, when one does not intend, and one does not plan, and one does not have a tendency towards anything, no basis exists for the maintenance of consciousness. When there is no basis, there is no support for the establishing of consciousness. When consciousness is unestablished and does not come to growth, there is no production of future renewed existence. When there is no production of future renewed existence, future birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure and despair cease. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. So here the Buddha says there are three things that are nutriments for the maintenance of consciousness. Firstly, what we intend. The Pali word is ceteti, from the word cetana. And what one plans, pakapeti. And whatever one has a tendency towards, anuseti, from the word anusaya, tendency. So these three things supports consciousness. What one intends, what one plans, and what one has a tendency towards. So there are these three things. Then there is a support for the establishing of consciousness, and then consciousness comes to grow. But the second part, if one does not intend and one does not plan, but one still has a tendency towards something, this also becomes a basis for the maintenance of consciousness. So even if you don't have plan, you don't have intention, but you still have a tendency towards something, meaning you still have a craving for something, then consciousness still continues, is maintained. So these three things, what you intend, what you plan, this could be like sometimes when a person is dying, he still has unfulfilled ambitions, still want to do this, still wants to do that. This is very common. Even in the suttas it is stated that even devas, having lifespan of millions of years, after such a long lifespan now, when they are about to die, and then they panic, and then they think, oh, they still haven't done this, they still haven't done that. So this is the first part, what you intend and what you plan. But however, if at the moment of dying you don't have all this planning and intention, yet if you still have a tendency towards something, that means you still haven't let go of craving, then this consciousness is still maintained. So you can see from here, it's not easy to become liberated from this flow of consciousness. And this flow of consciousness creates samsara, creates the world. So that's why one has to be totally cool, totally, like earlier we read, you have to be disenchanted with the world. And then you got to have revulsion for the world. Then you got to have viraga, dispassion towards the world. Totally tired of the world. And then only you can become liberated. So for most people, you have not come to that stage for most people. So the first stage is to attain stream entry. If you attain stream entry, then you have entered the path of the holy ones, the Aryans. And then you have a maximum of 7 more lifetimes. And as you go through these 7 more lifetimes, you become more and more disenchanted with the world. And then you slowly become more and more dispassionate towards the world, and one day you will enter Nibbana. Point 43. That's Savatthi. Monks, I will teach you the origin and the passing away of suffering. Listen to that and attend closely. I will speak. Yes, Venerable Sir, the monks replied. The Blessed One said, at what, monks, is the origin of suffering? In dependence on the I and forms, I consciousness arises. The meeting of the tree is contact. With contact as condition, feeling comes to be. With feeling as condition, craving. This is the origin of suffering. Independence on ear and sounds. Independence on nose and odors. Independence on tongue and taste. Independence on the body and tactile objects. Similarly, this consciousness arises. And then the meeting of the tree, namely the sense organ, the sense object, and the sense consciousness is contact. And with contact as condition, feeling arises. With feeling as condition, craving. This is the origin of suffering. Stop here for a moment. So here you see, for this, any one of the 6 consciousness to arise, there has to be this condition that the sense organ must be there. For example, for your eye consciousness to arise, you must have a good eye, and then there is form for the in front of the eye. So with these 2 as condition, eye consciousness arises. But if we think carefully, this is not the only 2 conditions, because there has got to be other conditions like volition. Volition, the will to live, then consciousness can prolong, because independent origination, consciousness arises dependent on sankhara, dependent on volition, right? So this is another 2 conditions for eye consciousness to arise. You got to have eye and forms. So once you have eye and forms, say like something comes before your eye, the eye consciousness arises, and then the meeting of the tree. That means the contact of the tree will start the mind working. Feeling arises. Feeling is the first thing. And then after feeling, you have perception. After feeling, you have perception. Then after that, you may have thinking. Then after that, you may have intention, intending to do something. Maybe you see something attractive. Then you have this perception, and then you intend to obtain it or something. So this starts the mind working. So, but once you have feeling, then if it's a pleasant feeling, then craving arises. Once you have craving, then this dependent origination goes. Craving leads to clinging or attachment, which leads to being, which leads to birth and suffering. So that's the origin of suffering. And what, monks, is the passing away of suffering? In dependence on the I and forms, I consciousness arises. The meeting of the tree is contact. With contact as condition, feeling comes to be. With feeling as condition, craving. But with the remainderless fading away and cessation of that same craving, comes cessation of clinging. With the cessation of clinging, cessation of existence, of being. With the cessation of being, cessation of birth. With the cessation of birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure and despair cease. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. This is the passing away of suffering. Similarly, independence on the ear and sounds, and on the mind and mental objects, this consciousness arises, and the meeting of the tree is contact, and with contact as condition, feeling comes to be, with feeling as condition, craving. But with the remainderless fading away and cessation of that same craving comes cessation of clinging, and then leads to cessation of being, cessation of birth, etc. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. So here, this sequence, you can consider it. That means if you have the 6 sense bases, and then the 6 sense objects comes before your 6 sense bases, then the consciousness arises, and then there is contact, and then feeling comes about. So this you can consider as this present life, this present life. And then if you crave because of feeling, you have craving, and that leads to attachment and being and birth. So birth refers to the next life, birth and aging and dying and all that. So here we are talking about 2 lifetimes, present lifetime and the future lifetime. So it says, if you want to stop that suffering, this you have to, with the remainderless fading away and cessation of that same craving comes cessation of clinging. So you have to stop the chain that leads to suffering at craving. If you stop your craving for all the things in the world, which also means you have to let go. You have to let go of your attachments, your clinging, and then slowly that leads to the cessation of being, and then that will lead to the cessation of birth or rebirth. So it's important to note that this has to come about with the cessation of craving. But for you to cut craving, you have to know enough Dhamma, have to practice enough Dhamma, so that you reduce your ignorance. With strong ignorance, you cannot stop this suffering.